What is up, y'all? It's your boy Aniki coming at you with a My Hero Academia review for chapter 314. Lady Nagant vs. Deku keeps accelerating. This chapter titled The Lovely Lady Nagant. This is actually one of the most important chapters in the series as far as delving into the lore and the way that the Hero Commission and society has been structured in My Hero Academia, and we're fully pulling the rose-colored glasses off of the story as a whole in this chapter, is what I would like to say. Now we immediately start with the fight, and Deku talks about how his smoke screen wouldn't have been able to like properly cover enough area, especially with the rain, and that she took the bait, and that he was just trying to get that opening so he could get in close to her. But the issue here is that Deku does something that is directly reflective of his inexperience. Instead of him grabbing her, hitting her with Black Whip, and then like tossing her into the building, or just in general having her locked down, he immediately starts investigating her because as if she'll immediately surrender to him just because he happened to grab her. This leads to her using the shape of the rifle to change and knock him away, all because he decided to over prioritize asking questions over subdual. There's an order to these things, and the inexperience of Deku is being highlighted here. He may have the ability to come in close and be a physical danger to her, but he is not as proficient, as experienced, and as wise as she is when it comes to these combat scenarios. And she even states that the Safety Commission taught her everything she knows. And Deku questions, why she's working for All for One. Then why are you working for All for One if you want to help society? If you used to be a hero, and she's like, He's plotting to take over everything. Like, what's going on here? And what Nagant says is that what you're saying is it's a fake sense of order. It's manufactured. Like, people are tinged by all this stuff. Because they've been living in this society, they've become complacent. And because that complacency has created a world that was beneficial to them, they see this as a safe and structured society. This is why some people don't feel like the hero's truly lost, because at least they're still able to operate and they're still trying to protect people. So people feel like, well, the hero system didn't fail. The hero system is still functioning, and those are effectively what you would call a loyalist. So a lot of people, like, if you're a person in the fandom and you kind of see the heroes as victorious or like the villains lost, to a certain degree it's like you have maintained your confidence in the heroes, so to speak, and you're just still rooting for them instead of looking at them as this is a situation that they failed and society has turned against them, even though a lot of the things in dialogue within the story heavily indicate that society has in fact turned against the heroes, and the society that looked up to them and worshipped them is gone. And we get Deku talking about like the parallel processing being messed up. He still isn't good enough with a third squirt. And we see her once again using these speaker type bullets. And it's important to note that we've seen her use curving rounds, hollow point shells. We've seen her use these interesting bullets that have like communicators within them, whether it's because she can custom make bullets. And I kind of suggest that maybe she knew something about Overhaul's quirk erasing bullets, and similar to Momo, and how once Momo understands something, she can replicate it or create it. It may be that once she understands the nature of a bullet, she replicates it. Though I think that once she finds out that there's a genetic base or marker involved with these quirk erasing bullets, then it's going to be like, oh, I can't actually utilize you anyway. And the thing that Nagant kind of emphasizes is that everything that she did was to preserve society. And while I thought she had gotten set up with an assassination run, what it actually was is that she wanted to stop killing people, which is just as bad, if not or worse, than what I thought the Hero Commission did to her. Because effectively they had her doing preemptive strikes on people who may or may not have even been like full-blown criminals or fully fledged yet. They hadn't actually committed any crimes, but they were still being murdered. And that's the thing, they weren't even given a trial, because you can't go to prison and sentence them based on, well, they might have been about to have, they were basically having a conversation about potentially doing something. So she comes in there and, wipes all these people out, and she's explaining how that's just part of the system, where that's how you maintain things. Like, yes, people like All Might. And so this kind of shows that All Might inadvertently shined so bright that he also strengthened the shadows. Like, the brighter the light shines, the darker the shadows can become. And in the turn, the Hero Commission, who aren't a bunch of people who are directly powerful, who are directly strong, maybe can never challenge All Might. Just like I don't think a lot of them are on the same level that they could actually fight or challenge somebody like Endeavor, which is why Endeavor, All Might are people who like are efficient, or Endeavor's polarizing public view kept him from being one of the people roped in and really included in with the Hero Safety Commission. And then you see like with Janus, who becomes like a more famous fashion icon, also while largely not seeming to be invested in like the deeper, darker aspects of the Hero Safety Commission. When Hawks pulls him into the mission, when he realizes he's gonna have to like potentially die, takes that risk anyway, and that's when like, we finally get him moving over onto that side. But the reality is that the majority of heroes are kept out of the loop about how corrupt this is, and the fact that, and so when Hawk says that he was kept in a birdcage, that seems to be very true. Now, one of the things that I really want to point out though is that on page 7, you see somebody who has like a fish-looking ears and fangs, and then you see Nagant covered in blood. But it's important to note that the bullet shots, like when she's shooting the guy from behind, you can tell because the blood splatter is an exit wound and the entry is in the back of the head. Or getting the curve shots, we see that she's actually out here murdering people, but the guilt comes with it because she's supposed to be a hero. She knows she's got these children who are fans, and she sees all these kids, but specifically one of the things she sees is a kid who also has like these fishy ears. And now the question becomes whether she met this kid back in the day and saw him and realized, and then he killed him as he was an adult. But the other potential is that she happened to have killed a guy and ran into his son or a sibling or just somebody who looked heavily like him. But the idea of her potentially having killed one of her fans as after he grew up because he was having a discussion about potentially committing a crime is an especially darker turn on the series, because it kind of shows that nobody's safe, but it would also kind of explain why she felt the way she does. Ultimately, she's claiming it's a very fragile system, and she's tired. And when she says she wants to leave, the president of the Hero Safety Commission straight up is like, oh well, he goes to reach into his pockets. We don't know what he's trying to do, if he's trying to just pull out a regular pistol or whatever. But Nagant isn't having it, so she just airs him out right there. And Deku explains that during this, like, the old story was just that she killed a regular hero. We even like had Deku talk about that. She killed a hero, but it turns out that she actually killed the president of the Hero Safety Commission, and that was buried too. The reality is that the government has gone out of its way to bury and hide so many instances of vulnerability. This is just common throughout the real world. Kingdoms don't publish their losses as well as they distribute their wins, or publicize their wins, I should say. So, while Nagant is revealing to Deku that she actually killed the president of the Hero Safety Commission, she explains to Deku, like, you can't have the idea that there's dissension amongst the inner workings of the government. You can't have the idea of mutiny. You can't have the idea of heroes wanting to step away, especially heroes who specifically work in tandem, in close proximity to the highest executives of the government. Those heroes becoming really famous and then wanting to leave that position is one that would set off a lot of red flags for many people. And as such, that behavior can't be allowed. And that kind of ties in with what Hawk said when he was like, the commission being dead is the first time I've been free. And now there's something else that I want to point out as far as Horikoshi's paneling goes, especially on page 12. If you look closely, you'll notice that there's a lot of bullets separating each panel and a bit of dialogue to kind of show that, like, as they're talking, that there's a bunch of bullets firing. And specifically what I want to document here is that the Mosin Nagant rifle, the magazine typically had 4 to 5 rounds stored within it. And, the rifle that she's named after, the Russian one that was used in a lot of wars that we talked about previously on this channel. And in turn, when Horikoshi is clipping the pages, he only uses 5 bullets to separate the lines and draw those so that it stays in line with what the magazine cartridge of the rifle actually is supposed to be. Just for the page aesthetic, obviously, since she can keep generating her own bullets, it's not a big issue. But it's just something worth noting. It's a small detail that Horikoshi made it a point to include. Now, there's something else that I wanted to talk about, which is that also on that early page 7, when you see her talking about various vigilantes, there's highly there's a shadowed figure that is pretty detailed enough that it looks like Yoroi Musha, and he has kind of a snarky, evil, like cheeky smirk on his face. And then there's also seems to be like someone who looks like they could be Crimson Riot. Also, arguably could be the Roboto Nomu, but that's supposed to be an armor plate that got put on his head because the brainstem was loose, not something that he had his whole life. So more than likely Crimson Riot. Um, But the main thing to address with Yoroi Musha is that if he's going to be used in this ominous back shot from back 30, 40 years ago, back when he would have been a vigilante, and you think back to how it was described, he made a lot of money back in his younger days doing, so like there could have been some scumminess to it. Like he might not have actually been that much of a real hero at all. Like a lot of Yoroi Musha's planning and stuff, the reason why he's so good at forming all these attack plans might have been because he was conscripting and conspiring with other villains back in the day so that he could become famous, so that he could make a lot of money. And then that's why they made it a point to emphasize that he had all these earnings from his early days. And then when All Might came and started cleaning stuff up, it was even easier, so he just stayed on to keep making money and being famous and being loved. And once All Might's gone and he's not as popular, and he finally confronts danger, he decides to step down because, he's been in the game 50, 60 years, but then also you tack on those 40 years, he realistically had an inflated sense of self. This is even reflected when he talks about being the number 9 and how that's just a reflection of the times, as if that doesn't reflect any of his work. It's just, oh, well, since I'm an old man, I'm not that popular anymore. But in reality, it's that he wasn't that good. He was just kind of coasting, and that's kind of what that was about. And since we have that emphasis on vigilantes, I do think that I'm a very pro Stain and Yoroi Musha having some kind of reckoning or interaction with each other, potentially giving us the real samurai battle of MHA, just for Horikoshi to kind of have some fun with that, because that does seem like an opportunity that in the process of the story that he would go ahead and take. The other thing that I wanted to mention, though, is that Horikoshi made it a point to give Nagant a very easily recognizable canonic PTSD symptom, in that she hallucinates the blood on her hands from the victims and the people that she's been splattering all over the place. So she's effectively not necessarily like this horrible person, but rather she's a person who became disillusioned with hero society and with the way that the world functions because of being so close to the corruption, living within those shades of gray, being forced to do things that she didn't necessarily want to do, looking at herself as someone that people and children were looking up to, while being someone that she herself wouldn't want a child to look up to because she knows who she really is. And that existence cannot be like having that contradiction of your reality within yourself is something that a healthy and decent person won't be able to tolerate. They will have to fight against that. And so even though All For One is corrupt and kind of evil, she kind of sees it as, I'd rather a bunch of people just know straight up that their ruler is some super strong, crazy, evil dude, and then plan accordingly and deal with that in life, than keep living in a society where at the end of the day, if they so much as think the wrong thing too loudly or do the wrong thing too loudly, they may have somebody like Nagant busting in their door in the name of the Hero Safety Commissioner, acting as an executioner effectively. Now, combat-wise, though, I do want to point out also Deku utilizing the 5th Black Whip, but using the max, like the long-range version of it for a combative purpose. We kind of already talked about how Black Whip's real range is pretty long, especially for those of you who watch the anime. You would have seen that the Black Whip tendrils are pretty long at max power. So the pinpoint focused 5th user Black Whip shot that he used, being like several hundred feet long, just to go and try to like close that gap, is consistent with what we've seen so far in the series. And it's him kind of, instead of using a bunch of like large tendrils, just one focused one, showing us Deku's mastery over Black Whip. This is kind of also explaining why Black Whip is the first quirk he had to unlock. It's the highest skill ceiling as far as what you can do with the quirk. Him having to use it for bracing and supporting himself, using it to enhance his mobility and try to bind Shigaraki. It ended up being like the quirk that was most useful, whereas Fajin, Danger Sense, Float, and even Smokescreen, all those quirks, while nice enough on their own, they do kind of fall in that realm of they wouldn't have done much for any of the fights or any of the interactions he's kind of had earlier in the story. And obviously, he could change that to make it, but no, like, this was the most this quirk specifically was the one that would cause the most adjustments in his fighting style, and as such, it's the one that he had to get the soonest. And it makes him being able to do moves like this believable, especially when you apply the principles of like one for a black whip being the same as manipulating the energy of one for all throughout his body. So he's kind of extending that energy that he's been focusing on, learning how to hone and train all the way to Nagant, and that's kind of the principle, and then pulling himself in. So we start seeing like these blurs, like, so Deku is definitely kicking it up a gear, going faster. So I think a lot of the early fight part of this fight, he was moving and operating in 30%. But once we start seeing his face streak and the speed blur lines, it's kind of implying to me that he's hitting it at least at 45%, similar to when he went and tried to stop Shigaraki from getting the eraser head. Showing us that Deku does think about the way that everything was swept under the rug, because he heard Nagant say this, and he had already heard Shigaraki say this, and he already had his experiences with Koda, and people saying that Hero Society isn't that great. Like, we're constantly encountering people who don't necessarily believe in Hero Society, people who are having these hair trigger reactions just to the fact that they meet somebody with a mutant quirk. He's starting to have these experiences and thinking about the small discrimination and prejudices that are existing under the current of society. And Deku's like, I have to, knowing that all these things are messed up, knowing that this world is great, knowing that there's these issues that stem from more than just, robbers and banks now. I'm starting to understand that people's ideas can create issues, and I need to reach out and figure out how to enable people to have better, happier existences without it being contingent upon just beating people up. She decides to exploit that, and it's like, all right, there's Chisaki. I'm going to shoot him. Now, we don't know for sure if she's actually going to shoot him, but the second that she points the gun at him, like, he's yelling, like, hey, are you done? We got to get to the boss. And Deku yells Chisaki, and there's like a look of shock on Nagant's face to a certain degree. Like, it's both ominous, but it also looks like she's mildly surprised. And she could just be surprised that it happens that Deku and Overhaul know each other. Or she could be about to just whip that gun right back in Deku's direction to get that free shot off and try to put him down. I'm not saying one or the other is definitively going to happen, but I do think it's this kind of can create a space in their discussion and allow them to possibly stop with the fighting and actually start talking and maybe come to a different conclusion, because Lady Nagant herself isn't completely I want evil, I want to be evil, I want to be Mr. Bad Guy. She's more like a person who is in the realm of anti-hero, working for the bad guys, doing what she can to get paid, while, ultimately it's this is a thing that even if he gets control, it doesn't change or doesn't make the world better or worse. It's just the same with more clear views of what's actually going on. And I think that's kind of Nagant's philosophy. So this can kind of turn into a discussion that leads them away from that while still being caused in an organic fashion, since she's been dragging Overhaul around trying to find a use for him this whole time. Finally finding one and getting it to stop Deku from applying that pressure that she was starting to get worried about, since she did comment on the fact that he was analyzing her moves and evading well and seeming to pay attention. So let me know what you guys think, especially about, actually, we also need to address the fact that every time we see the Hero Safety Commission recruit someone to be one of their top tier spies, they recruit them as a middle schooler or someone who's 5, 6, 7 years old. When I say that I think that Dabi actually might have spent some time in the Hero Safety Commission, it wouldn't have surprised me. Now I feel like this is even more sus, because they would have found an extremely mangled Dabi's body on top of that hill where the fire happened, and maybe he was actually one of their hit team people. But obviously you could argue that Dabi would have used that for leverage in his Endeavor video to completely tear apart society. So that's the thing that kind of makes that questionable. But because he just, it seems like he did just beat up Hawk's mom, or just have some people show up and intimidate her. But there is just something about even being able to figure out where Hawks' mom lives, that kind of information, it seems a little sus. But who knows? I would like to think that Dabi has a bit more to his story, especially in between, Sokoto Peak and where we are now. So we kind of got to finish those gaps, and whether it's he stumbled into an orphanage by Ujiko then left, or was working with the Hero Safety Commission for a while, or was getting trained by them and then pieced out. The Hero Safety Commission might have given him some time to actually practice a couple extra moves, and then he still left anyway, and they just don't talk about it. There's a couple of possibilities and variables that kind of come into play with this story, with this chapter, and like I said, like Nagant said, this is the chapter to take the rose-colored glasses off. It's really easy when mangaka don't go out of their way to just like show you organs and stuff flying everywhere, to look at a world like MHA as this bright, sunny place where people have superpowers and it's a great time. And it hasn't been that. This stuff was going on during the era of All Might. While All Might was active and taking on All for One and breaking down these organizations, the Hero Safety Commission was also building up power in the shadows in a way like allowing themselves to expand their influence, controlling backroom deals, trying to stop, different heroes, villains, making people disappear on both sides without trial. So it makes sense when you think about this being a society where they'll justify executing people who haven't even technically committed a crime yet. And, it's important to note that he tried to resist and like say, hey, like, hold on, like, you don't need to be doing this to me, and just was murdered anyway while begging for his life, essentially. So we have this society that seems like it's puppies and rainbows, but really it's kind of they're like this advertisement for this imaginary world that doesn't exist, but the Hero Safety Commission and society wants you to believe in, further strengthening the meaning and the truth behind Shigaraki's words when he was saying at the mall that it's all fake and that everything can break down at any moment. And now you see that it's always been that way. It's been contingent and hinging on so many terrible things that this society that Shigaraki wanted to destroy, that didn't lend a hand out to him. Especially when you think about the fact that Shigaraki could have been taken in by the Hero Safety Commission as a child, and if he had been found and been trained to be a hero, he might have just become like some kind of weird hitman lapdog that eventually went rogue that caused massive issues, which would have made him an even bigger foil to Deku. But at the same time, it's hard to believe that he would have been able to do that. Like, he would have had to become like the League of Villains then would have probably ended up being a bunch of high schoolers or teenagers conscripted by the Hero Safety Commission, and that kind of changes the entire story. But it's just something to think about. It's sad to know that the only way Shigaraki would have been saved, when he discusses how if somebody would have reached out to him, is if some complete random stranger who was strong enough to not just randomly die to All for One in case he wanted to troll their life more, but also was able to be a good moral influence while also not necessarily forcing Shigaraki into the life. There's so many variables that now come into play that make it seem like there was just no happy ending for Shigaraki, and I think that's extra sad. Let me know what you guys think, though, about this chapter, how you've been feeling about the latest ones in general. Make sure you tune in for the Church of MHA. We ended up having a 4-hour stream, so this video should come out even later than it's expected, or was intended to. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. I've been enjoying Lady Nagant. I'm excited for the next chapter, especially because we might not see a conclusion to, we should see a conclusion to the skirmish, or a conclusion, or what will happen will give us an idea of where the final resolution of this conflict is going to be. Let me know what you guys think. Like, comment, subscribe, share, join if you feel like it. Have a nice day. Hail Hori. I'm out.